Hello everybody and welcome to The Punter. Great to have your company for another hour looking ahead to the weekend sporting action and taking you through all of the odds that matter. Finding the value for you. This is the show that's on your side. Now I counted them out and I've counted most of them back in. This is Cheltenham Survivors Week. They're here in body. We'll find out whether or not they're here in wallet. Russ Wiseman from Sporting Bet and Neil Channing, our resident punter, in the studio with me. Great to see you both back. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Russ, how was it? How was Cheltenham?
Well, it was fantastic, first and foremost, Nick. Let's be very honest about that. It was a brilliant festival. Neil will look at it from a different angle to me, from a pure punters, traders angle. But from my perspective, the one thing I didn't want to do was come back to the punter after being at Cheltenham all week and say it was a score draw. But it was a score draw.
It was a score draw.
It was a score draw. There's no question about it.
Bookies and punters both not that happy.
Absolutely. And I mean, we spoke in great detail, didn't we, about these big four. On the Tuesday it was obviously Hurricane Fly, the Wednesday Sizing Europe, the Thursday Big Bucks, the Friday Long Run, about how this bet could really change the whole face of the industry. And to think that 3 of those 4 didn't win, and we still only just about came out level.
Doesn't surprise me, Russ. I've seen bookies do that before. They only just came out level. It's interesting.
And that gives you an idea.
It would be a big win for the
bookies. I'd have said that to you. If you'd have told me that kind of a scenario, Nick, before,
well,
I said it would have been
you had Quavega, Sprinter Sacra, and a couple of gambles as well.
Some big gambles.
A couple of gambles.
Just for punters that didn't play coach for everything, what was the gamble of the week? What were the couple of big gambles?
The gamble of the week was probably the pipe horse, wasn't it?
Yes, Sacra. Yes, Sally Flow, and that was very well backed. There was also even when you look at the Fox Hunters, the two really well backed horses there, first and second. A couple in the handicaps again that were well timed.
Son of Flicker, of course, that was a massive
Son
gamble.
of Flicker, 66 to 1 into 14. So Neil's right, but there were generally results that were pretty poor. I mean, even on day one, I think it was difficult to imagine. I think in terms of the overall money wagered on an individual day, you look at Sprinter Sacra, that was a seriously big gamble. And when punters have got that kind of ammo in their satchels, it really could have been quite dangerous. Hurricane Fly getting beat saved us all there.
That was a major shot, wasn't it? Huge. From a sporting point of view, but also from a punting point of view. That was probably one of the bankers for punters generally, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That was my worst race of the week because I was on binocular each way, and I'd chosen to do that rather than lay Hurricane Fly because I considered it to be a 2-horse race. It looks like McCoy agreed with me. I love Tony McCoy. I don't want to criticise him, but he did what I thought he probably should do: is track Hurricane Fly all the way and then come there to take him on. And he suddenly realised that actually that wasn't the one he needed to take on. I think. If he doesn't hit the last, maybe he gets third.
Yeah.
But I was listening to some on-course bookmakers. I don't know whether you find this, Russ, or you can give us some insight on this. They were saying that 33% of the business, or maybe nearly 40% of the business, is done on the Friday. So actually, to a large extent, it doesn't really matter what happens on the opening day.
It was unusual actually. I mean, big crowds every day. The crowd on Friday was just simply enormous. Right. And obviously, then when I call into the office to find out what kind of business is being done, it was far, far in excess. I was surprised actually because the overall calibre of the racing on Friday, it was only just about the same really as the other days.
But also, your occasional punter is much more likely to be dragged in by the fact that the Gold Cup's on and the Quarto Star story
and
everything
out
like
on Friday
that.
Afternoon to bet as opposed to duck out,
absolutely. Yeah.
And just a quick word on Quarto Star because he's such a massive figure in the horse racing world and the punting world. Both you and Alan Algar said on the punter show that we did last week that he was basically friendless from a professional punting point of view, and he expected him to run badly from everything. That got borne out.
Well, the fascinating thing, Nick, is
it's
that
like the professionals knew he wasn't going to show.
I mean, I think I spoke to you. It was quite a difficult line last week from Cheltenham, and I spoke to a few people. I mean, we pushed the horse out to about 5 to 1 very briefly at about 11 o'clock in the morning on Friday, just because we were so adamant we wanted to get it. And I think the general feeling then at that time was that there was going to be a big drift, and it could go off at 6 to 1. That's what we were talking about. We're not. Neil knows we're not complete idiots. We know what we're doing. There was a huge amount of money for the horse. Enormous amount of money for the horse.
You must have been devastated. People trying to back it.
Yeah, I mean, it was bizarre.
I'm interested to hear that because you're obviously an online firm, so presumably the punters that bet. I'm not saying that everyone that bets with you is super shrewd and they're all winning money. They're probably not, but they have a level of sophistication, maybe. And I'm not being disrespectful to people that bet in betting shops, but that was a horse for your betting shop punter to back. I'm following James Knight on Twitter from Corals, the senior odds compiler there. He said they were 5 to 1 Quarto Star slips against all other slips added together in that race. For
5
every
to
slip
1.
they took on another horse, they took 5 slips on Quarto
Incredible.
Star.
That's absolutely
But no
incredible.
real money. You know, £2,
Yeah,
£2,
£2, yeah.
£3, £5. No one was having £1,000 on it.
Right.
And I think that
it's
was the
fascinating.
difference.
But
Yeah.
you know, to think that horse touched 3 to 1 just before the off there, I think that's pretty remarkable, to tell you the truth. I don't think anybody could have expected that. And
if you're looking at just from a punting point of view, 3 to 1 in terms of its actual chance in the race
Well,
is a horrible.
I mean,
But then when you look at
when you
Betfair, where of course people are cold-hearted, cynical, and professional,
Mathematical, yeah.
it never went shorter than 9 to 2.
Yeah.
Right.
It's 3 to 1, but people are happy to lay 9 to 2.
Fantastic example for you guys of how kind of the popular weight of money or whatever can affect the price. Really, really interesting stuff. And just a quick word, you mentioned Cheltenham next year. People are already starting to tip up. Anything catching your eye?
We're pretty aggressive with our horse racing prices, to tell you the truth. We've, obviously as an online firm, we're not one of the very big boys, so we have to be quite bullish about
attract
chances.
the price.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we don't mind taking money a year in advance. However, that does attract some quite shrewd money. I think you've got your own 1 or 2.
Well, I looked at one. You guys were, I think you were 14 to 1, and I think the Racing Post picked up on it this week. Actually, their anti-post guy. Grand Douai for the Champion Hurdle next year. I mean, obviously Nicky Henderson had a superb week. That horse didn't make it to Cheltenham. Some people might say it's more of an Aintree horse. It didn't really, sort of was a bit of a bridle horse in the Triumph Hurdle last year. But that horse was 7 to 1 to win the Champion Hurdle. We've now seen Hurricane Fly isn't as much of an invincible machine as we thought it was. Maybe Binoculars knocking on a bit. Maybe Zarkanda isn't really the contender we thought it might be. The Triumph Hurdle this year was a bit rubbish. I think 14 to 1 Grand Douai, I could easily see that being 6 to 1 next year.
Make your bet now and sweat it for 12 months. Or just put it in a drawer or something. Now let's move on, because not only did we have Cheltenham since we last talked to you in depth, we also have had some pretty seismic football activity. The title race odds flip-flopped a lot during a game. The other night. It was an extraordinary situation, wasn't it? The Man City-Chelsea game having a huge effect on the title race. Oh,
definitely. And, I was at White Hart Lane that night. Obviously, there were different implications there for 3rd and 4th place, even 5th place in that game. And obviously, we had an eye on the screen. But, you look at this betting now for the title, and we've obviously been speaking in great detail on the punter now for months, haven't we, really, about the chances of Manchester City, and all of a sudden we arrive here now and they're 11 to 8.
Do you know what? I mean,
it's incredible.
There's been no point at the season when I've looked at the odds in which I wouldn't back Man
That's
City
right.
if I had to have a bet.
Isn't that amazing?
It's still true.
That's actually a great point. I still feel the same way now. But I mean, the other night, of course, we were faced with a very real possibility with maybe 15 minutes to go that United would be 4 points ahead. And even in a situation where they could get battered at Etihad.
Give us an idea of what the price would have been. They would have been.
I think they would have been about 5 to 2, 11 to 4. I think they would have been that big, I think, if they'd have lost that game. Because United's running, everybody's
this is what everyone's
focused on
talking
United,
about, isn't it? Like, I was playing in a poker game on Wednesday while all this stuff was going on. Yeah, a rarity. And every single person on the table said, well, Man United are going to win the league.
Right.
Like, even when Man City came back to win 2-1,
I just think
they said, well, they've got such an easy run.
It's a fantastic example of punters hooking onto something that they think's a certainty in their head. It's like Man United always win the league. They all win the league, but obviously it doesn't work like that.
But I think to put some perspective on Man United, and I think really on the punter, we have actually probably been kneeing them in the groin, haven't we, all the way through? We've been saying,
Apart
from Flash, and let's be fair to
Yeah,
Flash, he absolutely has been the only one out of all of us. And, we're not complete numbskulls. This is quite sort of sophisticated minds in the industry here. And we've all been against United. I think at one point, I even suggested that 3's on was a good value for City. And we all we thought that, and now we sit here, they're 11 to 1. I tend to agree with you, Nick. I still think that they're probably a bet right now as well.
I'm not in a hurry to bet on it, but if I was.
If I came into it cold now, there's only one bet I could have for sure. And in fact, I hadn't even looked at the odds since the matches on Wednesday, and I'm actually slightly surprised that it's not closer than that.
I agree.
Let me ask you a question, Russ, because we see these odds all the time and on the title. And what would you say is the percentage of bets taken on the Premiership title to win it that are done prior to a ball being kicked at the start of the season?
In terms of what they are.
No, how many? physically a number of bets?
Compared
what
to during the
percentage
season?
of bets are taken before we even start the season?
I would imagine maybe. I mean, you do get some good each way value sometimes. Then you probably see maybe 10%. I would have thought possibly.
Oh really? I would have said maybe 50%.
No, I don't think, because I think people now at this point now, right now though, this is a seriously heavy betting event because we've only got 6 weeks left.
Okay, all right.
Well, 6 weeks to go, kind of a coin flip situation.
See, for me, to be honest with you, I always kind of imagine that your average punter, when it's like October, November, and it's always the back page of the Racing Post, Man United drift or whatever, or Man City have been backed into whatever.
There you go.
I always kind of thought that was just a bit of a PR spoof, and that people didn't really lock their money up for 4 months at a time.
There's some really interesting stats on how Man United do in the second half of the season. You know, this idea that Man United always come on strong.
Yeah.
They actually really don't. It's exactly the same as horse racing. It's the other teams reverting to the mean, basically. They're just strong in both halves of the season. Let's look at the bottom of the table situation as well, because that is an interesting market. And the QPR game there is the bottom of the table right now. The QPR game was such a freak game.
Amazing.
Huge game.
Amazing game. And Neil, you were telling us last time we spoke about a punter friend of yours, a serious professional punter who's been back in QPR to go down.
Yeah.
How has that game affected his perception? Do you know, or how do you think it would affect it?
No, I haven't actually spoken to him about it. But, I mean, in terms of... you know, I think I was in that poker game again, and everyone was saying the same thing there. QPR have got such a tough run in. This match doesn't make any difference.
Right.
So it seems to me that punter mentality is so much on, you know, the number of times I hear people say, look at their next 3 games, as if the bookmakers haven't factored that into their prices. I mean, that just seems a bit mental to me. Oh, they've got such a tough run in, so they must be a really good bet to go down.
Right.
Pretty sure that people like
Bookies
Alan Olga, you know, who are doing odds for firms on football, have a look at that kind of thing. You know, that is available.
That is a good point.
I mean, the one thing you would say about the relegation is that when you get to the last 3 games, and even with all the parameters that Neil mentions here about, we've looked at the fixtures and we all know what happens, you still get games where, for example, last year, Stoke were at home to Wigan on the last game of the season, and Wigan were heavy favourites to win that game. They were only a little bit above even money to win that game.
This is a really good point.
It gives you an idea, though.
This is a really good point, because when people are saying, oh, QPR have got to play 6 teams that are in the top 12 in their last 6 games or whatever, half of those teams are going to have 0 to play at that time. You know, they might as well be playing a team, you know, a Blackburn or a Bolton.
And a game right now, and the point Neil makes is such a good one, is that a game right now that looks incredibly difficult on paper, QPR could quite easily be 4 to 5 to win in 3 or 4 weeks.
Like say you have to go away to Sunderland or something.
Yeah, exactly.
For the season. Yeah, exactly.
Especially if they're like still in the FA Cup and don't even care.
So let's look at the actual market then. We've been talking about QPR a lot. They're now the traditional 5 to 3 on. What is that price, by the way?
Well, it's around. It's
a real price.
It's a 4 to 7. It's a 4 to 7 chance.
It's a real price.
To be fair,
160.
You do quite a lot of prices that are sort of decimalised for the purposes.
No, I like it. I like it. It just looks.
I mean, we're a European firm essentially, but we have to convert our prices to something.
That makes much more sense than some of the traditional.
But what 160 in normal terms? But sorry, Nick.
Go on. Go ahead.
No, I mean, but looking at this right now, obviously I'm heavily involved with Wolves, and I have no shame in saying that I'd like them to stay up, but it's clear to me now that they are pretty much their fate is sealed. But one win can obviously just spin it around.
That's kind of a fun market to bet on, because it can change a lot, and it will change a lot, definitely.
But there's obviously one fact. I don't like to dwell on this, but obviously the one fact that is interesting here is that there's no question right now that everybody's second favourite team in the whole league now is Bolton. And let's be very clear on that. Everybody is feeling great affection for Bolton. Everybody would like to see Bolton do well. When we mention those last 3 or 4 games, if Bolton have got maybe a marginal fixture, let's say that, you can imagine maybe another team giving 70% where they may give 100. And I think that Bolton,
that's interesting.
As bizarre as it sounds, in that. Well, I just feel as though that Bolton's, I think Bolton's chances have improved.
It's definitely really affected all of football. There's no 2 ways about it.
No question.
We'll see how that plays out. Now, a market that we've been keeping updated on, mainly because it just is in the press a lot. Hasn't been a massively interesting market. Has got a little bit more interesting recently. I'm talking about the England manager position, where Harry Redknapp was basically unbackable a few weeks ago. And his price just keeps drifting because people are now thinking this isn't a done deal.
Well, I mean, we were 9-1 on at one stage here. We took a bet actually at 9-1 on. It wasn't a big one. I think it was a £900 to win £100 bet on it.
Yeah.
And I remember
you must be
thinking,
thrilled now. We can get 2 to 1
again, I'm admitting here, I'm endorsing myself tipping up huge odds on shots. But I mean, I actually think that I probably was on the punter before saying this is a done deal.
Yeah.
Well, it clearly isn't a done deal now, is it? Because Spurs are now in 4th place. A very real possibility they could drop out of that front 4. Can England really afford to appoint a guy who has steered his team from, guaranteed 3rd place and manoeuvred himself into?
But if there was another candidate, he wouldn't be 2 to 1 on. But these other people don't really feel like candidates.
Yeah, but I just think my view of this is you're dealing with the FA. You're not dealing with the press. Don't make this appointment. The fans don't make this appointment. The FA do. And Roy Hodgson is such. If you had to create an England manager, you would create Roy Hodgson from the.
And this is an organisation that have employed Ericsson and Capello without even thinking about it, against everybody's
I think they could do
opinion.
something bizarre. It's interesting. We need to move on, but it is interesting. We're going to take a break, I think, because there's a lot of sport to get through. We've got a lot of football this weekend, some really interesting stuff, and we're going to talk about how you find value in the Premier League. So don't go anywhere. It's going to be good. We'll take a short break. Welcome back to the Punter. We're going to get into this weekend's footballing action, and we're getting to that stage of the game where it's a lot of fun. We're coming towards the end of the season. Almost every game is a big one. So let's jump into it. Chelsea-Tottenham is the early kickoff on Saturday, and this is a big game for these two clubs. And a few weeks ago, you wouldn't have thought that this would particularly be a big game for Tottenham. Well,
I just feel as though that if you took this game, maybe going back maybe a month ago, Nick, I think probably Chelsea would be around about 11-8, Spurs maybe 15-8, something like that. And now, sit here today, they're odds on. I mean, they're 10-11 to win the game, and I think that's fair. I mean, it's just momentum. Things have gone against Spurs. I was at White Hart Lane.
You watch a lot of Spurs games. They've really dropped off.
They've really dropped off,
haven't they?
And let's be clear about it. They've really dropped off, and
right.
They're playing Cranchar with Modric and also with Van der Vaart. The mobility's gone out of the team. They really are struggling now, and Stoke with a better side. Let's be very clear about that. From pretty much 5 minutes in to the very end. So I think that these prices are fair. And now that Chelsea are back to the old situation where they're managing themselves, punters are very quickly on. They just latch onto that so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think probably the value's dropped out in Chelsea on the back of that. And now Neil will always say this: these matches price themselves up. My daughter could probably do it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty easy to do, isn't it? But right now, the momentum for Chelsea,
they're 17 to 2.
Prices
that's a typo.
17 to 20, I think.
17 to 20. Yeah. You're not going to. Please don't rush to Sporting Bet. You're not going to get 17 to 2.
Not just yet, no. But I mean, Neil may have a different opinion. But for me now, at this point now, I don't mind taking Chelsea on because they're odds on, and that's a short price in a big game.
Yeah, generally speaking, I think Chelsea are a club that over the next 3 weeks I'll be looking to oppose. Yeah. I'd kind of like them to win this game so that I can oppose them next week.
Oh, that's interesting.
I thought that in the match in midweek, Man City were even money against Chelsea, who were 7-2. I thought that was, I don't want to sound after time, but I thought that was pretty short Chelsea, and I think people have started to kind of say, oh, everything's okay now.
Yeah.
It's all, they've got rid of the manager, they've won a couple of games, everything's fine. They beat Leicester. I mean, they won a game.
I enjoyed the Torres is back stuff. It's like
yeah.
Wasn't he playing Leicester?
Exactly.
It's not quite the same.
Yeah, I mean, like people have got a little bit carried away. On the other hand, Tottenham have obviously completely imploded. I wouldn't be rushing to lay Chelsea at 10 to 11 here. No. I think this is just a no-bet game for me. But,
and I'm sorry,
I might play him running.
Yeah. Sorry to spring this on you, but do you get many bets on top 4 or finish top 4?
We absolutely we do now. Completely because and again for the reasons that we spoke about just in the other segment there. When it gets condensed and there's a little bit of to and froing, I mean, then it does become interesting, doesn't it? And now obviously Chelsea, I think they're still slightly off the pace. They're 5 points away.
You've got the partisan thing as well. The Arsenal Spurs thing is quite. People like betting on that.
Yeah, and we'll probably come up with specific match bets coming through now. He'll win it again now towards the end of the season. But for me, this is a game where bookmakers generally will be against Chelsea here, but they'll be happy to stand it at odds on. I think that's completely fair. I think given the climate that both teams are in.
Okay, that's the big early kickoff. The next televised game is Liverpool against Wigan. I'm full of self-hate for my team, Liverpool Football Club, after their debacle of the last. How they can pick up their paychecks after that last 10 minutes is unbelievable.
Well, they're getting away with it, Nick.
Unbelievable.
I mean, these guys are getting away. I think Kenny's getting away with this in a big way. I mean,
I don't think he will at the end of the season. If they finish kind of 8th, 9th. He's not going to.
His record actually, it's incredible, isn't it? His league record is very, very similar to Roy Hodgson. I know he's won a cup, and that obviously gets.
Well, they might win 2 cups.
They might win 2 cups, yeah. But the fact of the matter is that Liverpool are responsible for an enormous chunk of bookmaker profits this year in the Premier League, because they have failed.
Boo Liverpool.
They have failed at odds on more than any other team, and there's no. That's a stat that's absolutely realistic. They have failed odds on more than any other side, and Wigan must come into this game. You know, it's a freebie for them, isn't it? People will probably expect them to get battered. You know, I think I've seen this game before, been 5-1 on Liverpool. I've seen that kind of price knocking around. We've seen 2-7. There may even be a little bit bigger out in the village, but Wigan will go there and they'll give it a go. And maybe on the handicap lines, you know, plus 1.5 goals, Wigan might be worth a play here, I think.
I quite like Wigan. Wigan have drawn 4 out of their last 6. I think they outplayed Norwich, which, you know, Norwich may be on the downward spiral possibly. Liverpool don't really score that many. I know they scored 2 in the week, but it's not very often they scored 2 goals. I might go back to my hardy perennial and lay Liverpool to be winning at half time.
I thought you were going to say 2 bad teams take the big prize.
Oh, well, 2 bad teams. Quite close to that. It's pretty close. I mean, 12-1 is definitely fair, Wigan, but I think I'd like to lay Liverpool. You can probably have to go to 3-1 on to lay them on Betfair, but I might look at doing that. I didn't actually check out what price they would be at half time, but you probably have to lay about 4-6, I guess, or something like that.
I mean, I don't know the price, but just in general football terms, having a draw at half time is, you know, this is off the top of my head and anecdotal, but the number of goals Liverpool don't score in the first half is amazing. I mean, the
it's funny actually, because I play this market a lot, the draw at half time, and I play it in running, and I know I've got a few little things that I think work in my favour on it. But one thing I would notice with Liverpool is, if you take a team like Chelsea or Arsenal and they start well in a game and they're cracking on and having shots, people are prepared to pile into them. Sometimes after 12, 14 minutes, they might bet them at the same price as they were at the start of the game to be winning at half time. They don't do that with Liverpool. You have to actually really go after the money and take a bit of a chance relative to the prices at the start of the game. So it's harder to lay Liverpool. The punters don't fall for them quite as much.
They are a bit like a good poker player who's running bad as well, though. They've been running terribly, it's definitely true, but still, you can't.
Never mind, Never mind.
Never mind. It's always next year. That's the beauty of being a football fan. Let's move on in a hurry. A huge game in the title race. Stoke Man City takes place on your TV screens this weekend. Stoke is the classic hard place to go, but City still will be odds on for this.
Well, yeah, that's right, and they should be. And in a way, I'm flying against the face of what we just said, you know, about the title here. But Stoke were good on Wednesday, very, very good indeed. Maybe we shouldn't look at it in these terms and analyse it from a hardcore just odds perspective, but they will be very much up for this game. There's a little bit of history apparently between the two teams, and the fans don't get on so well. These kind of things do matter when you're playing your last kind of 3 or 4 home games. Stoke will certainly be up for this, and the way they played against Spurs on Wednesday, they actually played there with great endeavour, great fight, when they didn't actually have any reason to, and that probably matters as well. So they'll go into this with confidence. I think City will have to be on their mettle here. They'll really need to play well.
It's not the game you want, is it? If you're chasing a title?
But you know, you see City so often 2-5, 4-11 away, and the reason they're 8-13 is because this is a tricky game. It's not an easy one, and again, you're not getting a big price.
Actually, by this price, I mean, I definitely think if you wanted to just make a rule for yourself, it wouldn't be a bad one to say don't bet odds on away from home in the Premier. But obviously, you can throw those rules generally out of the window. There's no such thing as a rule that works every single time. But it wouldn't be a bad way of tightening up your punting if you wanted to make a rule for yourself. In this one, though, like normally speaking, when one of the top 3 or 4 clubs is going to play an unfashionable side away from home, you can bet your life that the bookmakers have added a bit in for the fact that they know which way their punters are going to play. You know, if you look at Sportingbet's client base, there's a lot more people that like Man City generally and have backed Man City more than 5 times this season than there are that will have done that with Stoke. So therefore, you would think they might sort of factor that in and go 8-15 or 2-1 on. They haven't. They've dangled a carrot.
It's very tempting, actually.
They've dangled the carrot.
That's a good point. I think it's the point Neil makes is good, because I can definitely see that price. They could easily go off 4-7-2s on, couldn't they? They really could. But I think that generally the industry probably looks at this now as being a very difficult job for City, and I don't think they can go.
I wouldn't back them at this price because I'm a bit wary about, and I think Stoke are underrated. But
you never back a big Premiership team. We know that.
Not very often.
West Brom Newcastle is also on this weekend.
4 o'clock on Sunday for the big game of the weekend.
It is the big game. They presumably both won't play in their home kits. That would be a disaster. But West Brom, well, they've been playing reasonably well. They're kind of out of it. They're getting close to the kind of team where you want to play them because they don't have anything to play for.
And
they are not quite there.
And they are playing well. They're scoring goals. They're not bad at all, are they? And I saw them knocking 5 at Molineux in the Black Country Derby. They were very good. Maybe the sideline to this game is the fact that Roy Hodgson is kind of making a late bid to maybe get into England contention. He won't want his team to ease off at all. Newcastle, obviously, they've still got great aspirations of a European place. They could certainly finish ahead of Liverpool in the league now, no question about that. But I mean, the prices are clearly right. He might have a different idea how to play it. I mean, the draw looks painfully short in a game like this, but that's because probably it's the most likely scenario, really, if you're looking at the game.
I'm interested by this game. West Brom are normally like super unfashionable and everyone hates them. People have really started to, get into West Brom lately. They scored 4 goals against Sunderland at home. How many goals do you think they've scored the rest of the season combined at home, Russ? Have a guess.
Give us
10.
I was going to say 14.
Yeah, 14 is total.
Take
4
out
of them in one game.
That's amazing.
So, they don't really score that many goals this side. You can't really beat the Premier and beat the Asian handicaps and beat the betting syndicates of this world just by looking at X's and 1s and 2s and looking at who won last week and current form. You need an angle on top of that generally. Yeah. But in this game, I would say we've got a team that's 6th in the Premier playing a team that's 13th. We've got a team that's only scored 14 goals at home this season against a team that's okay at scoring, not too bad, and one of them's 9-4. I think Newcastle look a fair bet here. I think West Brom, people might... I saw them on TV against Wolves. They were super impressive, but it was only Wolves.
Yeah, interesting. So maybe a little fancy for Newcastle there. And finally, on the televised games, the other game in the title race, Monday night sees Man United's ritual home slaughter of Fulham. What price would Fulham have to be for you to want to back them?
Well, the funny thing is that we've seen money already in this game.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a couple of fairly lumpy bets here at 2-9, and funny enough, you actually can see that people are trying to buy the money. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. On a Monday night at Old Trafford with that crowd, them travelling, and we've also seen money 4-6 minus a goal. I mean, again, that's another one. I mean, 2-0 is just simply the most obvious scoreline you've ever seen.
I wouldn't want to lay it, to be honest with you. I mean, if you sort of sat there and said, right, what's your best lay of the weekend? I wouldn't want to put my last money betting against Man United here. It wouldn't. If you'd have shown me the caption and it said 7 on,
that's right.
I'd just be saying, it looks no bet game for me. 7 on looks about right. I'm not going to advocate people watching the punter rushing down their betting shop and having a 9,000 or 2 on, but
if
I wouldn't really want to back Fulham.
We're being very general here, but the rule with Fulham usually is they're very good at home, they're very poor away, aren't they? And that seems to be the rule. It's a reasonable rule, and United are obviously dominant at home all the time. It's a proper big hitters game, actually. I mean, it is teed up for those big hitting heavy punters.
Now I have to say, by the way, because I think a bit later we're going to talk about how I've let the kids down a bit recently with some of my bets. I did flag up Wayne Rooney each way to be the Premier top goal scorer.
And what's the current tally?
Well, he's now super guaranteed to get 2nd or 3rd, most likely 2nd.
Your money's safe, basically.
But he's got, how can they score 5 goals last week and he doesn't score 1? I mean, how is my luck?
Life is cruel, Neil.
You're cursed.
I think we're going to get a Rooney hat-trick here, and that's going to make it a proper race against Van Persie.
And that's all he really cares about. That's your televised football done now. After the break, some other sports capturing the attention this weekend, including F1. Keep it right here with more Punter coming after these.
Bang there, didn't it?
Welcome back to the Punter, where my guests are discussing a bet they had during the commercial break. And that's a true story. Don't try this at home. Now we're going to move on to other sports. We're going to start off with a bit of cricket. Apparently there's cricket going on. Sri Lanka are playing England in Sri Lanka, which is not a lot of fun by the looks of it. Incredibly high temperatures and a little bit of concern for the players, but they're going to play anyway. 2 test series, which is a bit odd, but that's what they're doing. Now, Russ, just talk to me about cricket a little bit. How big of a sport is it? How much market do you make on this?
Yeah, now cricket in terms of test matches, Nick, is not really big in terms of actual betting terms. The amount of money placed on it is minimal. It tends to be quite warm money as well. People who understand what they're doing, understand the conditions of the game. You know, we've kind of evolved, haven't we, as bookmakers and punters over the last few years. And 5 days isn't really the way they play. That's why we offer so many odds, like runs in the next over, runs in a session, because people want that, instant kind of fix with it. And obviously we've got the IPL starting shortly as well, which will really will get people betting quite heavily. But this is definitely opens it up now for shrewdies. I mean, my brother's a real expert on cricket, and he will be watching this ball by ball, really focused on it, because there will be nuances in the pitch. Obviously, playing in the subcontinent England, they're not as powerful as you are at home. Dominant at home England, but facing these spinners and these low pitches over there, it's a different matter. But generally, people like being with England now, and the reason is that they're tough, they're resilient, they tend to find a way to win. They're not like so many other national teams. They tend to really dig deep. So
those are the prices for the series. We were talking to Angus Lochran last night, and he was advocating the draw, which you can get by coupling or whatever, because you get 2-1 on the drawn series, which in a 2-match series doesn't sound like the worst sort of thinking in the world to me.
Russ, let me ask you, because people always talk about whenever they talk about cricket betting, there's a lot of talk about illegal betting from the Indian subcontinent. My understanding is most of that takes place in Dubai, and that the market is enormous, and the whole of India is betting on cricket. Is that such a big thing as it was 3 or 4 years ago?
Oh, but it's funny you should say that, Neil, because I don't believe we're really seeing any of that action that we used to see. I mean, when we go back 10 or 15 years, there were kind of the remnants of it when we were working in the spread betting industry. You did see that kind of the tremors of that money coming through, but I think it's really kind of lessened off now, slackened off quite a lot.
Because the one thing that I remember just was like a license to print money with cricket, which I don't think happens anymore, was the unsophisticated Indian punters wanted to bet on the draw way more times than a draw was likely to happen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was a period for about 4 or 5 years where the draw was almost odds on in every game, wasn't it?
And the money would filter through to the English market, and the draw would get really well backed in. And then publications like the Racing Post would point out, well, you know, the bookmakers thinking that the draw is a 55% chance in this game, and our stats say that it's really only a 36% chance, so you should, back the result or lay the draw or whatever. I don't think that really happens anymore, though, does it?
No, I don't think it does either. I think people are wise to it now. It is a more sophisticated kind of global financial model. It's no question, though, in terms of cricket, it is one of the best sports to bet in running, in play, because you can form an opinion, you can see the way a pitch is playing, and the guys who really do know what they're doing, the better traders, the better odds compilers, can certainly kind of manoeuvre the market to suit themselves. And I still think that the interesting bets on this are batsmen over under runs in each over session. That's where the kind of instant fixes are made. That's what we tend to take.
Let's have a very, very quick look at the other futures market. So the top batsman you can back if you'd like, and Alistair Cook is the favourite. Kevin Peterson, who you never quite know what you're going to get, and Jonathan Trott up there as well. And I think we'll also have a look at top bowler just to complete this. There you go, Monty Panesar, Graham Swan. The spinners, although the other point Angus made was he didn't think the Sri Lankan pitchers were going to turn as much as when they played India, and maybe you could get a bit of value backing a seamer. That's
right, and I mean, when you look at the top batsman list there, it's a pretty solid group of players, isn't it? You're not going to get any edge there.
It's a phenomenal team.
Yeah, you're not going to get any edge with those prices, because that's a gang of fairly competent performers. The interesting market there is definitely the bowlers, because if these pitches don't spin as been suggested, the likes of maybe a Stuart Broad comes into it, and even Stephen Finn, who on his day is starting to look like he could certainly kind of be the breakthrough player. He's certainly kind of risen above Tim Bresnan, I think, in the pecking order now. So that might be the interesting market there. But when you look at the England team, it's full of good players, isn't it now? And you're not really going to get any edge, I don't think, in terms of any of these series markets at this point. Okay,
maybe look to bet in running then if you want to have a bet on the cricket. Let's move on. Formula One kicked off last weekend to great fanfare, and it has its second race in Malaysia this weekend. And same question that I asked you about cricket, Russ. How big is Formula One as a betting market? It's certainly a lot of fun to bet.
And getting bigger. Getting bigger this year, and a couple of reasons, Nick. I mean, listen, look at last year. 7 of the first 8 races, Vettel was pole. He clearly had the best car. People very quickly turn off when they don't see a competitive market. I mean, just look at one look at that now. It's amazing that I'm not talking about 5 to 4
it's
or 11 to 10 favourite. It's a terrific market.
Year,
and the great thing is this year, of course, is that we've got Kimi Räikkönen coming back in there, and Michael Schumacher's in a car that is finally competitive. It is definitely a betting market
well,
now.
The other thing that's happened really big is they've got their own dedicated channel now.
That's right.
It's all on Sky. Is that going to kill it a bit? Or?
I think that will just add to more of more interest generally. I just think there's got to be more and more interest. But I do think now at this point,
it's interesting. Two things are interesting. First of all, Lewis Hamilton's been fastest so far, and he's not favourite. And second, Sebastian Vettel. If you'd have said at the end of last season that you would get 10-3 about him in the second race of the year this season, you would have jumped all over it.
That's right.
It's astonishing how much more competitive
and it looks like a terrific price. I mean, apparently this track is very good for in terms of long straights. That should help the Red Bull, who've clearly got the quicker car over a long straight period. But just one look at the betting there gives you an idea that if you to focus on it, if you can find out some edge in terms of qualification, you will get some sort of market. But Neil and I still come from a kind of culture where if you're leading at the first bend, it's nearly done and dusted.
Well,
that's not so much the case anymore, though. But that's the way it used to be.
For me, this is a sport that is hard for me to attack because I like to play on things where there's lots and lots of public money making an overreaction to something. Now, possibly with Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton, there might be public money causing an overreaction. I don't think you get a lot of public money at 6 a.m. in the Philippines or Australia or wherever the hell this Malaysian Grand Prix is. Once it comes to Europe and we start looking at, Monaco and things like that, now you've got public money to play against. Now I get interested in the Grand Prix. And also I get interested from an each way point of view. A lot of these races are quite uncompetitive. They're down to three players, and if you can play each way, often you can get yourself a free bet to nothing. But so I'll be watching it, but I'll be watching the betting. I won't be watching the race. It's the most boring thing ever. But I'll certainly be watching the betting and keeping an eye for later in the season.
As the new F1 channel trailers, which are one of the most exciting things on my TV. But I know the reality isn't like that.
And of course, when you get some weather knocking around as well, it's still a great spot. I mean, that's when the shooties do start appearing. When you get some dodgy weather coming around, it gets really exciting.
Totally. Let's just clear off the other futures markets, the Drivers and the Constructors' Championships. The Drivers' Championship, well, you can back Vettel at 2-1, which is,
Yeah, I think he was 11-10, wasn't he, before the first race. I think
people are reading a lot into the first race of the season.
They don't quite know what to make of it because I think he actually drifted to 3-1 and now he's got backed in again. So I mean, maybe there's an overreaction. I don't know. I wouldn't be rushing at those prices
for anything. Looks pretty fair. And we also have the Constructors' Championship, which again McLaren are the favourites. Red Bull second favourites, and a bit of a two-horse race there. And that's all the F1 discussion that we're going to do. Please do write in if you found a more entertaining market. Now, for F1. Now, we're going to do baseball, and this is my fault, but the baseball season starts next week, and you can bet, obviously, for the season, much more interesting to bet on game-by-game basis, but we'll cover off for the season. And I'm particularly interested in this because I found a great bet, which is the Texas Rangers, who I think are 6th favourite in some of the markets. And when I actually made this bet, there was a huge disparity. There was 17-2 was the shortest price. Corals had them at 12-1. Now, I didn't check today, so doing the show, I think you can still get 12-1.
And this is a team who've been deep into the postseason the last 2 years.
Basically the best team, in my opinion, the last 2 years.
Great pitching staff. Josh Hamilton's re-signed. I think he's going to be playing again. So they are a top side. But this is, look at the market there. I mean, you're going to see the little bits of money for the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox because they are the organisations they are. Of course, the big mover in that market pre-season was the Los Angeles Angels. Obviously, they've signed Albert Pujols. One of the biggest contracts ever. Huge signing for them. But the other team that's interesting on that list there is the Miami Marlins, formerly the Florida Marlins. They've got a new coach now, Ozzie Guillen, and they've made some big acquisitions as well. So they could be interesting. But it's such a random sport to bet. It's a great sport to bet, and I love it. I love it as much as anyone. But it's starting pitching wins this. Make no mistake about it. That's what wins it. And I still look at the likes of the San Francisco Giants, and of course the Yankees having the best pitching really.
Yeah, totally. I think the other interesting thing about it is that you can, because they play such a long regular season, but then the playoffs are so short, people sometimes make mistakes because you're sort of generalising from a really big sample into quite a small sample when you play the playoffs. There's so much luck in the playoffs. I'm trying to get you interested.
No, I'm interested. I'm interested in that because it's an American sport, and the one thing I like about American sports is that it's a constant battle between the public and the betting syndicates.
Absolutely.
And I have a long-term view. I want to be with the betting syndicates. I think the public lose and the betting syndicates win in all American sports every year. So I don't do much on baseball as it happens, partly just because the season is so long.
Yeah.
And you know, you can't do everything. But yeah, I mean, from time to time I get involved, and I'm looking for sort of late moves and get with the syndicates and against the public. But yeah, I don't have any view at all in the long term.
Just very quickly, if somebody's watching this and thinking, "Oh, that all sounds very good. How do I do that?
That's a great question.
How do I get where the syndicates are?"
Well, you know, it's not as easy as all that, is it? I can't really give away everything on the punter.
Fair. But they should set that if they really want to have it. That's what their mission should be, basically.
Well, no, I mean, there are certain things that the syndicates do often, which is to go against public teams. I mean, that would be the main thing that they do.
A great example in that price, the Red Sox, in my opinion, are too short. I think they've had a disastrous off-season, but they're such a public team.
And you know you're going to be able to oppose the Red Sox at Fenway Park with the team maybe plus 1.5 on the run line, and they're going to be decent value. I think that's a fair point that Neil makes.
Definitely.
Opposing the big money,
Definitely. But the key tip is get with a syndicate, mainly because it sounds cool. Start your own syndicate for your sister or something like that. We're going to do our pundits' picks and a little bit more football chat after this break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the last part of today's Punter, looking at the sports weekend action and finding you the value. Now, we've got a sick note today, which is a bit sad. Flash is a little bit under the weather, Gordon Watson, but he has summoned up the courage to send in his picks. I don't know if he felt sick after he saw his picks or before, but he didn't feel great. Anyway, this is what happened to Flash's football picks last week. If you've been following this from the start of the show, he has been ahead of the game. Another 4 out of 5, which is not too shabby.
I have to say, I mean, when this is all cut and dried and we kind of survey the damage on the punter throughout the year, what we've done, Flash is going to come out of this quite nicely.
He kills us.
He's been very, very good. I mean, you know, 4 for 5 regularly.
He's
I mean,
very good on the lower leagues.
I think what he's extremely good at is he plays things that are obvious, but they're actually in a cleverer way than it would appear. Yeah. And he takes on teams who are playing badly and goes with teams who are playing well. And maybe I should start taking a leaf out of that book. I think that might be the way forward.
So. It sounds like it's a learning curve.
Good tactic.
Yeah, well, he has provided us with his picks for this week. So let's have a look for those of you that follow. He's got Newcastle to beat West Brom.
Likes Newcastle, doesn't he?
Which is with Neil. Norwich to beat Wolves, which we're going to go on to talk about in a second. Leicester to beat Hull. Sheffield Wednesday to beat Leyton Orient. And then Torquay to beat Port Vale. That's a bit of classic Flash action if you follow those. So let's just spend a second on that Norwich-Wolves game, Neil, because you were just talking about this. You'd like it the other way.
Well, first of all, I've been with Norwich a lot this season, and I think Flash mentioned it the other week, that he said, well, it's about time you got off them, isn't it? They've started to, do no good. They're a classic mid-table side. They're not going to be in the real shake-up.
And
they're
that's
not going to
huge
be relegated.
for them. Like, if you've given this at the start of the season.
They've had a great season.
So there's every reason to believe their foot could be off the throttle, actually.
Terrific, and Wolves, everyone knows about Wolves. They're obviously very big favourites to get relegated. They got smashed up 5-0 last weekend. So, of course, I can see why Flash thinks a home win, bit of a banker, whatever. But they're 4 to 5, and we got the money this year backing Norwich at big prices. Wolves are 4 to 1 away from home. There's only one team that's going to be absolutely trying for their lives in this game, and that's Wolves. The other thing is that 5-0, okay, it's bad getting beaten 5-0. But they got beat 5-0 by Man United. Man United are beating everybody. I mean, they're allowed to be beaten 5-0.
To me, this is fascinating to me, because to me it's like a distinction in mentality. Because this game sort of sums it up, really. Flash is trying to pick the winner of the game, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to
You're trying to pick the value. You're still trying to pick the winner of the game, but you think that
I'm trying to pick
they're
the winner of my
priced.
lifetime. I'm not really trying to pick the winner of the game. I'm trying to pick the situation where the price that's offered by the bookmakers is bigger than the chance of it actually happening.
So this is really interesting for people, I think, because I don't think a lot of casual punters understand exactly how this works. You actually probably think that Norwich will win that game the majority of the time.
Definitely going to win the game in the region of 50% of the time.
But you think if you can get 4-1 forever, you're making money.
I don't think there's any doubt about what Neil's doing is the right thing, and this is what makes this so fascinating when we analyse this and go into some detail. But if this game had been played probably after half a dozen games this season, when Wolves had 7 points and were looking quite strong and they'd won some games, you're probably looking at Wolves trading around about 13-8, 7-4.
Yeah, maybe 2-1.
They won't be a big price. They're going to Norwich, a brand new team.
4-1 is massive.
4's now a big price, and of course
there's clearly
they did all right last week.
There's clearly a reason. It's last week's game.
Yeah.
Now, in American sports, when a team gets absolutely stuffed, the next game the punters want to be all over them because they know that they'll have had to train harder this week. They've been told to come in early. The players are disgusted with themselves. They were embarrassed. They want to prove themselves. In English sports, they say, oh, they got beat. That means they're going to get beat 5-0 every week. Now, one of the other reasons they got beat 5-0 was they were down to 10 men against Man United.
And it was 1-0 when they had the man on top.
Exactly. I mean, if they'd have survived with 11 men for the whole game, maybe they wouldn't have got beaten 5-0.
And if they get beat 1-0, maybe the price is a little bit different.
Yeah, maybe.
One sideline to the game as well was that I was at the game at Molineux, obviously in the Wolves section, obviously cheering them on, hoping they can get out of this. There was a far better feeling amongst the players and the fans, which does matter in these situations. They had an ovation when they came off. I think they go into this game full of optimism, which is actually different to a lot of games recently.
It's not a team that have totally given up. There's one other small thing. I know you want to move on. That perception
might be wrong then.
Yeah, there's one other small thing that we have mentioned a few times, which we probably should repeat again, which is that teams like Wolves select games to really try hard for.
Yeah.
And Man United is not one that they kind of waste their effort on.
Great point.
But this is a game where they have to win.
Yeah. Now, I know what you're doing sitting at home. You're thinking, why haven't you embarrassed Neil by putting his tips
Put them up, go on, whatever.
Sorry, I was saving. You have to save at these moments.
So I did all these, by the way. I did them all, so I mean, I've paid as well.
Let's take a look at Channing's charity picks from Cheltenham week. So there was one general selection of tips that you did for other sports, which we'll look at first, and then you did your Cheltenham picks. So Scotland to beat Ireland went down.
Yeah, that one was really painful. That was a really painful one.
Q Card did win the Arkle, unfortunately only with 50 quid.
It came second.
It came second.
So we got and Menorah came third. Yeah. Q Card was second and Menorah was third.
They both won the Arkle.
Yeah, but
overall we
Big
lost.
Zeb was third and Binocular was fourth. It hit the last fence hurdle. It was a little bit unlucky, maybe. But I wasn't very happy.
The funny thing, I look at those bets now, though, Nick. I have to tell you this. I look at those bets now, and I'd like to do them again.
I'd do them all again
now. They're good bets. They're some great business there.
Get to beat Ireland at +9. That was a real.
And that each way double should have.
I think they were slaughtered, weren't they? Anyway, so a little bit down on that one, and then we asked you for some specific Cheltenham bets in addition to the Cheltenham bets you had on there. Lots of Cheltenham bets. I know it's all mixed up.
Well, this was the week before. I did this one. I did this one about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
At the time, Alpharoff was 9-2 to win the Arkle, and I decided that was a very big price.
Was big.
It actually got backed into 9-4.
So we're showing this because you bet in the past for what's just been resolved.
Yeah. This was from like 6 weeks ago or something like that.
People were a bit disappointed in Alpharoff, weren't they?
Well, it made one bad howling error, and then it never
like
recovered from that. You know,
that's Cheltenham all over, isn't it?
Yeah, basically.
Especially the Marises. Okay. You're going to do better this week, right?
I'm going to try.
Yeah. But don't try, do.
No, I'm going to try hard.
Okay, great. Let's have a look at this week. Wolves we've already discussed. You really like them at the price.
We mentioned Newcastle against West Brom. I mean, I just made that point. West Brom scored 14 goals at home. 4 of them were in one game against Sunderland. They really don't score that many goals at home. Swansea to beat Everton is an interesting one. The last 2 games, Swansea and Sunderland, I'm actually kind of betting against myself in something I'm going to say. One thing I would like to really say is that when we're looking at there's all these games in the Racing Post for this weekend.
That's a lot of games.
I would pretty much say that, I know Flash puts up 5 and we encourage lots of selections in every game. It's very unlikely that there's going to be mistakes in most of these games. In most of the games, the bookmakers are betting to 102, 101, 103 over round. And actually, any of the 3 results in the long run, if you bet it 1 million times, is actually going to be bad for you because that's what a 3% profit margin means.
That's how bookmakers
you're supposed to, you're supposed to lose 3% over time.
So really, the skill is picking the games and not betting on games.
Absolutely. And you're not going to be able to get rich by just simply, generally speaking, by just looking at the league table and saying, well, this team are 6th and this team are 13th, so this team should be this price. You're going to need something a little bit more. Now, the betting syndicates, the big gamblers, Tony Bloom, Matthew Benham, they're looking at ultra hot team news. They know exactly what's going on with the teams. They can tell you 12 hours ahead of time whether Van Persie's going to be left out or not. Right. And they just seem to know that stuff.
So they're just looking for those bits of information that give them an edge. And Russ, just comment on this from a bookmaker's perspective. You basically love it when a punter comes in and backs 15 football matches as a general rule, despite the fact that sometimes they hit.
I mean, what we have to imagine here is that of the punter on the show here, we're looking at the sophisticated side of it, but you know, punting's also fun, isn't it? And I think it's important you don't take that away from people. I mean, and there are some lovely stories where people land these 15 times. I remember we spoke earlier in the season about the Greek guy who landed the half million. We had some at Cheltenham, which is lovely. But you know, let's be realistic. It's a form of entertainment, and I think if somebody's going to have a 12-timer, they have to expect one or two of those legs to let them down, and that's obviously bread and butter business for any bookmaker. So it is difficult. The more difficult punter to beat is the guy who picks his spots carefully and maybe reacts to something that we don't know about. Now that's where it is difficult for a bookmaker. If there is a team news or something, or I mean, obviously Neil is the kind of client as a bookmaker you don't really want, because he's clearly looking at it from a different angle. It's going to be difficult to beat.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right.
He hasn't got any money at the moment. That's why you don't want it.
Yeah, I don't believe it. We've got to come close to wrapping up. You make one more point.
What I was going to say about those two games is there's. You know, I don't know anything about the team news, so I have to look at other things. And in those two games, I'm looking at something where the market overreacts. Now, the market will often say, this lot have got a big game next week, so therefore they're not going to try this week. And in the game Swansea against Everton, it's a common market perception that Everton are not going to try because they've got a big FA Cup game against Sunderland.
Right.
Swansea are really underrated. They beat Fulham 3-0. They beat Man City 1-0. I think Swansea are a really good bet to beat Everton. On the other hand, Sunderland have got their FA Cup game. I'm going against that. I'm going to back Sunderland against QPR because I think QPR are in a letdown situation. Had a brilliant game in the week. Everyone's excited by that. And they're going away against Sunderland. They're still quite rubbish, QPR.
Okay, fascinating insight into how a professional looks at things and how that's different from a recreational punter. Russ, anything else for this weekend? Anything you like?
I'm having a quiet one, Nick, actually. I'm just kind of settling down for I've got a big week of football next week. I'm at Old Trafford on Monday. I'm at White Hart Lane on Tuesday. Yes. You boys are welcome to join me if you want to come to any of those games. I'm sure you'll find a way of getting yourselves out of it. But I mean, I'll be at both those. So
I'm happy to have the offer. Thank you very much.
It's a watching brief this week. It's actually quite a quiet weekend, but I do think the football will take centre stage with some great games, some great betting games. I think turnover will be huge this week. I think there's plenty of people who want to maybe spin up some Cheltenham winnings with some heavy football bets this weekend. Yeah, it should be interesting actually, and of course the title race will change once again. So we'll keep you updated on that. We'll keep you updated on everything here in the Punter. I hope you really enjoyed this week. We had a real chance to teach you a little bit about how you should be looking at football markets. I think that was really, really interesting stuff. Go back and watch it again, I would. Massive thanks to Russ Wiseman from Sporting Bet and to our resident punter, Neil Channing. Whatever you do this weekend, I hope you bank some winners and have a great weekend. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on The Punter.
Stay ahead of the game with Sports Tonight Live. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for Sports Tonight Live on Facebook and like our fan page. Follow Sports Tonight TV on Twitter and tweet us your thoughts and opinions. Sports Tonight Live, it's the platform for the fans.